The apartment was cold in a way that no heater could fix. Marcus Webb sat on the edge of the kitchen table, his sneakers, held together with duct tape and prayer, dangling above linoleum so worn it looked like aged paper. The radiator in the corner made sounds like an animal dying slowly, metal creaking in protest against November's teeth. Outside, frost clung to the windows in crystalline fractals that looked almost beautiful if you didn't know what beauty meant when you were hungry. His mother's purse sat open on the counter. $63.42. He'd counted it 3 times because the numbers never changed, and he kept hoping his math was wrong. Catherine Webb worked the morning shift at Rosie's Diner, 5 a.m. to 1 p.m., and then the evening shift at the CVS on Highway 40 from 4 p.m. until closing. Between shifts, she had 90 minutes to drive home, change clothes, and pretend everything was manageable. She was 51 years old and looked 70. Her hands had arthritis from the diner work, and her feet swelled by evening, but she never sat down. Never. Marcus had seen her cry exactly once, in the shower where she thought he couldn't hear her over the running water. He had stood outside the bathroom door that night and pressed his forehead against the cold wood, listening to sounds no mother should make. The rent was due in 6 days. The eviction notice was still taped to their apartment door, printed in bold letters that felt like accusations. 30 days, then 28, now 22. The landlord, a man named Petters, who drove a truck with rust bleeding through the paint, had already warned them. One more late payment, and Catherine would find her belongings on the sidewalk. There was nowhere else to go. Her sister in Knoxville had made that clear. 2 ex-husbands, and no family who'd admit they were related. Marcus worked weekends at the supermarket, stocking shelves for $7, $50 an hour, 20 hours a week, if he was lucky, which he wasn't. That money went to utilities and grocery staples, rice, beans, eggs, the cheapest protein they could find. It was never enough. There was always a gap between what they had and what they needed, and that gap seemed to grow wider every single month, like a canyon opening beneath their feet. He'd skipped lunch at school for 43 days straight. He'd counted. The free lunch program had ended in October, and pride, stupid, useless pride, kept him from applying for the extended assistance. He watched other kids eat, and he told himself he wasn't hungry. His stomach knew better. If you're watching this, remember, desperation doesn't announce itself. It whispers. That morning, Marcus had made a decision. Not the kind you make after thinking it through. The kind you make at 4 a.m. when you can't sleep, because the weight of your mother's exhaustion is pressing down on your chest like a stone. He needed money, real money, not the $20 he'd earned this Saturday stocking shelves. He needed the kind of money that could buy his mother time to breathe, even for a week, enough to keep the lights on, enough to keep them from becoming invisible. At school, kids talked about the iron-bound MC clubhouse on Old Millbrook Road. It was the kind of place adults warned you away from, the kind of place that existed in the margins of a small town, acknowledged only in whispers and nervous glances. Some kids said the bikers were criminals. Others said they were worse, the kind of men who'd grown so comfortable with violence that it had become their native language. Marcus didn't care what they were. He only knew they existed, that they had money, and that sometimes men like that needed men to do work they didn't want to do themselves. Dirty work, dangerous work, the kind that paid cash. He'd written a note and left it on the kitchen table, weighted down by his mother's purse. "Mum, I'll be back before your shift. Don't worry." The lie sat there in blue ink, and he almost crumpled it up. Instead, he pulled on his jacket, the one with the tear in the right pocket that he'd been meaning to fix for 6 months, and walked out into the freezing morning. The road to Old Millbrook Road was 3 miles. He knew because he'd looked it up on his phone, using the library's Wi-Fi after school. 3 miles through neighborhoods that got progressively emptier, past houses that looked abandoned, until the trees closed in, and the world felt smaller and wilder both. The clubhouse appeared like a scar on the landscape, a converted warehouse painted matte black, surrounded by a chain-link fence. Motorcycles were parked in precise rows, chrome catching the pale morning light like broken mirrors. There was a sign above the entrance, a skull wearing an iron crown, the iron-bound MC. Marcus stood outside the fence for 7 minutes, counting his heartbeats. This was insane. This was the kind of decision that got people hurt. He knew that. Every smart part of his brain was screaming it. He pushed through the gate anyway. The sound of his footsteps on gravel was too loud. Everything felt amplified. The cold air in his lungs, the tremor in his hands, the voice in his head that sounded like his mother asking him why he was risking everything for nothing. He reached the door, raised his fist, knocked, and waited for the world to change. The man who answered was enormous. Not tall exactly, though he was that too, maybe 6'3", but enormous in the way that comes from decades of work that demands physicality. His shoulders filled the doorframe. His hands looked like they could palm a bowling ball. Scars crisscrossed his forearms, white and raised like ancient maps of violence survived. His cut, the denim vest covered in patches, read Reaper across the back in blood-red stitching. Below that, Road Captain. This was a man who held authority the way other people held skin, not consciously, but absolutely. He looked down at Marcus with eyes the color of wet stone, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Lost, kid." The voice was surprisingly soft, a tenor, almost gentle, which made it somehow more terrifying. "No," Marcus said. His voice cracked on the single syllable. He hated himself for it immediately. "I'm looking for work." Jake Holloway, though Marcus didn't know his name yet, studied the boy with the intensity of a man who'd learned to read people the way others read books. He saw the worn sneakers held together with tape, the jacket that didn't fit properly, hanging loose in a way that suggested it had been purchased for a larger frame and never replaced. The eyes that had seen too much adult worry for a child's face. He'd seen eyes like that before, 30 years ago, in the mirror. "We're not hiring," Jake said, but he didn't close the door. "I don't care what the job is," Marcus said. The words came faster now, tumbling out before fear could dam them up. "I'll do anything. I work hard. I show up. I don't ask questions. I just need—" He stopped himself. "Don't tell him you're desperate. Don't let him see the wound. I need the work." Jake Holloway had been president of the Ironbound MC for 18 years. He'd made decisions that shaped the lives of 81 men and the families attached to them. He'd survived wars that didn't have names, operated in margins where law enforcement didn't reach, and built something from nothing. He prided himself on reading situations with precision. This didn't read like a setup. This read like hunger. "How old?" Jake asked. 16. "School?" "During the day. I work evenings and weekends." Another lie, another truth mixed in. School was where he disappeared into the background and tried not to think about the churning in his stomach. Jake stepped aside and gestured for the boy to enter. The inside of the clubhouse was larger than it appeared from outside. The main room was a cathedral of chrome and leather, pool tables, a bar that had probably been salvaged from a demolition site, a massive flat-screen TV mounted above a fireplace. The smell was layered, gasoline, beer, tobacco, and something metallic underneath it all. The smell of a place where different kinds of business happened. About a dozen men sat scattered throughout the space. Prospect members mostly, patching cuts or cleaning weapons, or simply existing in the comfortable silence of a crew that had no need for constant conversation. They looked up when Jake entered with the boy, and Marcus felt their collective weight of attention settle on him like a predator's gaze. "What's your name, kid?" Jake asked, moving toward a back office. Marcus Webb." "Family in town?" "Just my mom." Jake nodded, not unkindly. "And she knows you're here?" Marcus hesitated. The truth would have been simpler, but it would have also ended everything. She knows I'm looking for work. It wasn't a no. Jake chose to accept it. The office was small and surprisingly neat. Filing cabinets, a desk made of reclaimed wood, a gun safe behind a painting of an eagle. Jake gestured for Marcus to sit. "You understand what kind of organization we are?" Jake asked. It wasn't a question, really. It was a boundary being drawn. "I understand you're not the church," Marcus said. Jake almost smiled. That's one way to put it. He leaned back in his chair, and the leather creaked under his weight. "The Iron-Bound doesn't employ teenagers. We have rules. One of them is, we don't put kids in positions where they might get hurt. Another is we don't create situations that bring heat from the cops. Hiring a minor, that's both." Marcus felt something collapse inside his chest. He'd walked 3 miles for nothing. His mother would still be counting change at the kitchen table. The gap would still be widening. "But," Jake continued, and the word hung in the air like a lifeline, "we have brothers here, crew, family, and sometimes family helps family for reasons that aren't about business." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Get the guys in the main room. We need to talk about something." Within 5 minutes, the main area of the clubhouse had transformed. 81 members of the Iron-Bound MC had materialized, moving with the fluidity of people who answered calls instantly. They ranged from prospect kids barely older than Marcus to men in their 70s, their cuts documenting decades of membership, their faces telling stories of roads traveled and choices made. Jake stood in the center, and the crowd silenced naturally, respecting hierarchy that required no announcement. "This is Marcus Webb," Jake said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "He came here this morning looking for work, not asking for a handout, not asking for charity, looking for work." He paused, and in that pause, Marcus understood he was being presented to something larger than himself. His mother is working herself to death trying to keep them afloat, and this kid, instead of stealing or dealing or any of the shortcuts available to hungry people, walked to our door and asked if we could use him. Jake looked directly at Marcus. "I want you to tell these men what you told me about your mom, about why you're here." Marcus stood, and his voice came out steadier than he felt. He talked about the double shifts, about the eviction notice, about his mother crying in the shower, about the gap between what they had and what they needed. He didn't perform, he didn't embellish. He simply told the truth, and the truth was more powerful than any speech could have been. When he finished, the clubhouse was silent in a way that felt sacred. Then Jake raised his hand. "How much does your mom owe in back rent?" $4,200, Marcus said. He'd done the math 100 times. Jake looked around the room at the faces of 81 men, and something passed between them, a decision that required no vote, no discussion. It was simply understood. "Then that's what we're going to do," Jake said. "Not because we hire kids, not because we're charity, but because when someone shows the kind of courage it takes to ask for help, you honor that courage." He turned to Marcus. "Your mother's rent is paid, and you're going to work here. Honest work. We'll pay you fairly. You're going to learn the business. And you're going to be treated like family. That's what the Iron-Bound does." Marcus felt something break open in his chest. Not in destruction, but in the way a seed breaks open to grow. "How many?" he asked, confused. "How many of you?" "All of us," Jake said simply. 81 riders, one family. The morning Marcus started working at the Iron-Bound was the morning his mother cried differently. He'd told her the night before, standing in their kitchen while she tried to process what he was saying. "They paid the rent, Mom, all of it." She'd stared at him like he'd spoken in a language she didn't understand. When the reality finally landed, $4,200. The eviction notice nullified. The crushing weight lifted off her shoulders. She'd sat down at the kitchen table and wept. But these weren't the sounds that came through the shower door. These were tears of relief so complete they bordered on prayer. Marcus had started at 6 a.m. before school. The clubhouse was alive in the early morning in a way he hadn't seen before. Men were working, some cleaning motorcycles with the precision of jewelers, others handling inventory in the back warehouse, still others making calls and managing the complicated logistics of running an organization that existed in the margins of legality without quite crossing into criminality. Jake had assigned him to work with a man named Curtis, a 47-year-old with a Vietnam vet patch and a workshop filled with motorcycle parts in various stages of repair or customization. Curtis had grey hair pulled back in a braid and the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades in the sun and wind. He smoked unfiltered cigarettes and spoke in sentence fragments, but his hands moved through mechanical work with an artist's precision. "You know bikes?" Curtis asked, handing Marcus a rag and a can of degreaser. "No." "Good. Then you won't have bad habits to unlearn." Curtis pointed to a Harley-Davidson that looked like it had been partially disassembled. "That's a 1972 shovelhead. Classic piece. Needs a full restoration. You're going to help me do it." "I don't know anything about—" "You know how to listen," Curtis interrupted. "You know how to follow instructions?" "Yeah." "Then that's enough to start." Curtis lit a fresh cigarette and gestured to the frame. "Everything means something. Every bolt, every seal, every connection. If you treat it like it matters, you learn fast. If you treat it like a job, you stay ignorant forever. Which one are you going to be?" Marcus realized this wasn't really a question. It was a statement of expectation. "I'm going to learn," he said. Curtis nodded and handed him the degreaser. "Then we start with this. You're going to clean every surface. Don't miss anything. Pay attention to the small parts. The small parts are what hold everything together." The morning disappeared into work. Marcus's hands became slick with grease and degreaser. His back ached from bending over the bike. Sweat dripped into his eyes despite the cold warehouse air. But there was something meditative about it. The repetitive motion, the visible progress, the way the metal began to shine as it was cleaned. Around 10 a.m., Curtis brought him coffee and a sandwich without being asked. "Your hands look like they're about to fall off," Curtis said. "Eat." Marcus hadn't eaten a real breakfast in months. The sandwich, roast beef, cheese, fresh tomato, no skimping on portions, tasted like salvation. He tried to eat slowly to savor it, but his body had different ideas. He finished in 4 bites. Curtis watched without commenting, then made him another sandwich. By noon, Marcus had to leave for school. He hesitated, not wanting to abandon the work. "You'll be back after?" Curtis asked. 4 o'clock. "Then we'll pick it up then. The bike isn't going anywhere." Curtis wiped his hands on a rag that had probably been dirty since the Clinton administration. "Your mom know you're here?" "Yeah, I told her this morning." "She okay with it?" Marcus thought about his mother crying at the kitchen table, about the way she'd held his face in her hands and whispered, "Thank God. Thank God, baby." About the way the fear had left her eyes for maybe the first time in 2 years. "Yeah," he said. "She's okay with it." "Good. That matters." Curtis pointed toward the clubhouse proper. "Before you go see Jake. Tell him you did the first 6 hours right. He'll want to hear it." Jake was in his office, reviewing paperwork. He looked up when Marcus knocked, and something in his expression shifted into what might have been approval. "First day?" Jake asked. "Yeah." "How'd it go?" "Good. Curtis is teaching me. There's this bike." "The 72 shovelhead," Jake said. "That one's special. Curtis has been working on that restoration for 3 years. He doesn't let just anyone touch it." Marcus processed this information. "Why'd he let me?" Jake set down his paperwork. "Because I told him I saw something in your face. The same thing I see in every iron-bound member worth a damn, the ability to commit to something and see it through, no matter how long it takes." He pulled out an envelope and handed it to Marcus. "First day's pay, $50. Marcus stared at the envelope. $50 for 6 hours of work was more than he'd ever made in a day. With the rent." "The rent was taken care of by the crew," Jake said. "This is your wage. You earned it. That's different." Something in Marcus understood the distinction. This wasn't charity, this was commerce, fair exchange. He'd worked and he'd been paid. The dignity in that was profound. "Thank you," Marcus said. "Don't thank me," Jake said. "Prove you deserve it, every single day. That's the iron-bound way. You work, you show up, you become someone people can count on. You do that long enough, you're not working for us anymore. You're working with us, your family." If you're following this story, hit that like button. This moment matters more than you know. Marcus left for school with the $50 in his pocket and the weight of that promise settling on his shoulders. He would prove it. Every single day, he would prove he deserved to be part of something this powerful. His mother was waiting for him when he got home that afternoon, still in her work clothes, but without the exhaustion that usually clung to her like a second skin. "Tell me everything," she said. And Marcus did. He talked about Curtis and the 72 shovelhead, about the coffee and the sandwich, about Jake's words about family and commitment, about the $50 earning through work rather than receiving as a gift. His mother listened with the intensity of a person who'd been given a miracle and wanted to understand how it worked. "They sound like good people," she said finally. "They are," Marcus said. He believed it completely. 3 weeks into his employment, Marcus understood that the iron-bound MC operated by protocols that rivaled military structures in their precision, though significantly less formal and infinitely more human. He'd learned the morning routine, arriving before dawn, starting the coffee machine, which was treated with more reverence than most churches reserved for holy water, and beginning whatever task Curtis had laid out the previous evening. He'd learned the names of all 81 members, not just their road names, but their real names, their family situations, their stories. He'd learned that Bear, real name, Timothy, a 280-pound prospect who'd survived 3 deployments to Afghanistan, always liked his coffee black and took it with exactly 2 cigarettes worth of quiet in the morning. That Smoke, Richard, 58, a former electrician, kept photos of his grandson in his wallet and showed them to anyone who made the mistake of asking. That the sergeant-at-arms, a woman named Diana, who was the only female member with a full cut, ran a tighter operation than most military bases. He'd learned the hierarchy through observation and gentle correction. Prospects didn't speak in church, the formal meetings held once a week. Members had vote on decisions. Officers held authority earned through years of commitment and demonstrated judgment. And Jake, president, or simply Jake, depending on context, held a position that wasn't really explainable in conventional terms. He was father, judge, strategist, and living conscience all at once. But the real education came on a Thursday evening when Curtis took him to his first informal gathering. It wasn't the structured church meeting, it was simpler and stranger. A bonfire in the field behind the clubhouse, roughly 40 men scattered in groups with beer in hand, food cooking on a grill, and the kind of easy silence that comes from people comfortable in each other's company. "Come on," Curtis said, handing Marcus a root beer. Curtis was particular about this. "You're not old enough for beer, and I'm not losing my credibility vouching for a kid who shows up drunk. I want to introduce you to some people properly." The first stop was a group gathered around a motorcycle that looked like it had been constructed from the dreams of someone who'd seen every bad decision possible and decided to pursue all of them simultaneously. It was painted in layers of custom airbrush work, skulls and naked women and wolves all melting into each other, chrome everywhere, mechanical sculptures hanging off various points. "This beauty belongs to Wrecker," Curtis said, nodding to a man who was maybe 6'5" and built like a refrigerator. "That's his real name too, Walter Reeves, but he became Wrecker early on. Wrecker, this is Marcus, the kid I was telling you about." Wrecker turned and looked down at Marcus with eyes that had the quality of someone watching an interesting insect. "You're the rent kid," Wrecker said. "Yeah," Marcus said, uncertain if this was good or bad. "Jake said you had courage," Wrecker said. "The kind that matters, not the stupid kind." He gestured to the motorcycle. "You want to know what this is?" "A motorcycle?" Marcus offered, which immediately felt like a stupid answer. "It's a promise made metal," Wrecker said. "Every single piece of this bike is something I chose. Every custom part is a decision I made. That means every time I ride it, I'm riding what I believe in. That matters." He handed Marcus a beer, an actual beer, cold and amber. "You're working now. You're earning money. That makes you part of the crew, even if you're still learning the code. So you drink with us." Marcus looked at Curtis, who nodded permission. "Just don't make a habit of it," Curtis said. "One beer on a gathering night is tradition. Getting drunk is weakness." Marcus took the beer. It tasted terrible, bitter and yeasty in a way that made him immediately understand why people drank them for effect rather than flavor, but holding it made him part of the moment. Over the next hour, he was introduced to dozens of variations on the same theme. Men with names like Prophet, a mechanic with an uncanny ability to hear problems in engines before they manifested, Dog, who hadn't explained why, and Torch, who had once accidentally set himself on fire and not only survived, but laughed about it. Each of them had stories, and each of them seemed genuinely interested in Marcus. The strange part was how easy the interest felt. These weren't men performing inclusion. This was actual curiosity mixed with the kind of acceptance that came from knowing Jake had already decided Marcus was worth their time. Later, when the fire was burning lower and the crowd had thinned, Jake appeared with 2 beers and settled on a log next to Marcus. "How's it going?" Jake asked. "Good," Marcus said. "Really good. Everyone's been, I don't know, nice." "That's because you came here the right way," Jake said. "You didn't come looking for an easy path. You came looking for work. You came looking to earn your place rather than assuming you had one. That resonates with people who've built their lives on earning their place." He took a drink of his beer. "I want to tell you something about the Iron Bound. We're not a gang in the way you probably heard about on the news. We're not going to ask you to do anything illegal or hurt anyone or compromise who you are at your core. What we are is family. We take care of each other. We show up. We honor our word. We understand that loyalty is a currency that matters more than money." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Why do you do that?" "Because I learned a long time ago that men without community become men without purpose," Jake said. "And men without purpose make choices that destroy themselves and everyone around them. The Ironbound exists because some of us decided we'd rather build something worth being part of than spend our lives destroying things." He set down his beer and looked at Marcus directly. "Your mother is going to be all right now, but more than that, you're going to be all right, because you've got 81 people who will show up for you the way you showed up for your mother. That's not a small thing, that's everything. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you." Marcus felt something settle in his chest. He understood, in a way that went beyond words, that his life had fundamentally changed. Not just financially, though, that mattered, but fundamentally. He had belonged to nothing before except his mother and the struggle to survive. Now he belonged to something vast and purposeful. "Thank you," he said again. Jake stood and put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't thank me. Just become the man you're already becoming. That's all any of us can ask." The 72 Shovelhead restoration became Marcus's education in a language that existed beyond words. Over the following months, Curtis taught him to read the metal, to understand that a motorcycle wasn't just a collection of parts, but a system where everything connected to everything else. One misaligned bolt could cascade into failure. One sealed connection properly made could last decades. "This is like life." "Too," Curtis said one afternoon, as he guided Marcus through the process of reseating a valve with micron-level precision. "Everything you do affects everything connected to it. Do it right, and the whole system sings. Do it wrong, and something breaks eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not for years, but it breaks." Marcus had started bringing textbooks to the workshop, studying between tasks. He was determined to graduate early, to earn his diploma while building his portfolio with the iron-bound. His teachers noticed the shift. The kid who'd been present but invisible suddenly had clarity, purpose, a sense of direction. His mother noticed too. She'd stopped working the evening shift, able to sustain their life on the diner money alone. She was sleeping more. The lines around her eyes had softened. She asked Marcus about his day with genuine curiosity, rather than as an escape from her own worries. "You're happy," she said one evening, stating it as fact rather than question. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I am." "I'm proud of you," she said. "I want you to know that. I'm proud of who you're becoming." It mattered in a way that Marcus struggled to articulate. His mother's pride grounded him, reminded him that the iron-bound wasn't replacing his family, it was expanding it. By month 4, Curtis had taught him enough that Marcus was handling major restoration work independently. The Shovelhead was nearly complete, its engine block gleaming, every component restored to a standard that would satisfy a perfectionist. Curtis watched Marcus work now with a different quality of attention, the gaze of a master evaluating an apprentice. "You've got hands," Curtis said one afternoon, "real hands, the kind that want to do things right. That's not something everyone has." "Thanks," Marcus said. "I'm saying it so you know it's true, not so you feel good about yourself," Curtis said, which was characteristically Curtis. "You need to know it because eventually you're going to have to teach someone else. And when you do, you need to remember what this feels like. The learning part, the doubt part, the moment when you start to understand that you're building something that's going to matter." Over months, the iron-bound had become Marcus's daily world. School happened, diplomas were earned ahead of schedule, but the real education occurred in the workshop and the clubhouse. He learned not just mechanics, but philosophy, the unspoken code that governed how 81 individuals existed as a single organism while remaining fiercely individual. He learned that courage wasn't about fearlessness. It was about doing necessary things despite fear. That loyalty wasn't blind obedience, but commitment to people who'd proven themselves worthy of that commitment. That honor wasn't an abstract concept. It was a daily practice of keeping your word even when it cost you. He also learned the darker edges. One evening, he witnessed Jake having a conversation with law enforcement, a state trooper who'd pulled over one of the brothers for an alleged traffic violation. The trooper had been aggressive, looking for leverage or confrontation. Jake had been ice. He'd known his rights precisely. He'd known the law precisely. He'd known exactly how far he could push back without creating a situation that would spiral. The trooper had left without making the stop official. Later, Marcus asked Curtis about it. How did Jake know exactly what to say? "Because Jake studies," Curtis said. "He doesn't go into situations unprepared. That's a different kind of strength than what people usually think about when they think about motorcyclists. Jake's strong because he's educated, because he thinks 3 moves ahead, because he understands power in all its forms. The understanding deepened. The iron bound wasn't lawless. It was precisely lawful in its understanding of law. It moved in the margins with intelligence and precision. By month 6, when the shovelhead was finally complete, the entire iron bound showed up for the unveiling. The motorcycle sat in the center of the clubhouse. Its restoration so complete, it looked brand new despite being nearly 50 years old. Chrome gleamed, paint shone, every bolt was perfect. Curtis pulled a tarp away, and 81 men and Marcus stood looking at what had been built through patient commitment and technical excellence. "This is what happens," Curtis said, addressing the room, "when someone knows their craft and cares enough to do it right. This is what happens when you refuse to take shortcuts." He walked to Marcus and put a hand on his shoulder. "This young man earned his place on this project. Started from zero knowledge. Now look at this bike. You think Curtis did all this alone?" The room erupted in applause, and Marcus felt heat rise in his face. He'd never been a center of attention before. He didn't like it exactly, but he understood its purpose. This was the iron-bound recognizing contribution. This was community marking a passage. Jake stepped forward when the applause settled. "Marcus, come here." Marcus walked to the center of the room, uncertain what was happening. Jake pulled an object from his jacket, a patch. The iron-bound colors, a skull in an iron crown, the words "Iron-bound MC" curved above, "Prospect" marked below. "This is a prospect patch," Jake said. "It means you're on your way to becoming a full member. It means you've shown the qualities that matter to us: commitment, honesty, skill and care for your work. You're not there yet, but you're on the path." He handed the patch to Marcus. "You're 16 years old and officially a prospect with the Iron-Bound Motorcycle Club. That comes with responsibility. It comes with obligation. It comes with the knowledge that when you wear this patch, you represent all of us." Marcus took the patch, and his hands were shaking. He understood that this moment mattered in a way that most moments don't. This was a threshold being crossed, an identity being claimed. "I'm going to earn it," Marcus said. "I know you are," Jake said. "That's why I gave it to you." The apartment above the closed laundromat became a gathering place. Catherine Webb, Marcus's mother, began hosting dinners on Sunday afternoons. She'd learned the preferences of the iron-bound members who cycled through, which men liked their coffee black, which preferred cream and sugar, which wouldn't eat anything with cilantro. She learned their stories through patient listening during the meals. Bear talked about his nightmares from Afghanistan and how the structure of the iron-bound had given him something to focus on besides his trauma. Smoke showed videos of his grandson on his phone and explained how membership meant he had more time with family because the community took financial pressure seriously. Diana talked about being the only woman member and how the iron-bound had been the only place she'd found where her strength wasn't seen as threatening. What Marcus noticed was how his mother began to heal through this exposure to community. She'd lived in isolation for so long, 2 failed marriages, family that had abandoned her, work that consumed everything. Now she had company, not romantic interest, but something deeper, the knowledge that she mattered to a group of people who decided to show up for her son. One evening, after the members had left, she put a hand on Marcus's face the way she used to when he was small. "Do you know what you did for me?" she asked. "When you walked to that clubhouse." "I got you rent money," Marcus said. "No," Catherine said. "You showed me that there were still good people in the world, that there were people willing to help just because helping was the right thing to do. That changed something in me, baby. That changed something fundamental." The iron-bound dynamics became clearer to Marcus as he spent more time in the structure. Jake wasn't simply a president, he was a patriarch, making decisions that affected the quality of everyone's life. Curtis, despite not having an official title, was the keeper of craft and standards. Diana, the sergeant-at-arms, maintained the code and called out violations or lapses in honor. Each person had a role that transcended job description and became identity. Marcus began to understand that the iron-bound survival as an organization depended on something more basic than law or threat. It depended on earned respect, on the understanding that every member had chosen to be there, on the knowledge that belonging meant something because it had to be earned rather than inherited. One evening, Jake called Marcus into his office. "I'm going to tell you something," Jake said, "and I need you to listen carefully. This information doesn't leave this room." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of whatever was about to be shared. "The iron-bound exists in financial security because we know how to move money," Jake said bluntly. "We distribute product that people want to buy. We operate warehouses and storage facilities. We do work that sits in the gray spaces between legal and illegal. I'm not going to spell out the details. You don't need to know them yet. But I'm telling you this, so you understand that the financial security we provided your mother, the wages we pay you, the structure we've built, it's all built on a foundation that the law would object to if it understood it clearly." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that knowing this is something you need to decide about," Jake interrupted. "You can remain a prospect and keep your hands clean. You can learn the mechanical work, the legitimate side of what we do, and build a life that's completely defensible legally. Or you can move deeper into the organization. You can learn the business. You can become someone who understands the full scope of what the iron-bound does." "What are you asking me to do?" Marcus said. "I'm asking you to choose with full information," Jake said. "I'm not forcing anyone deeper into this organization. That's not how we work. But I want you to know what you're part of before you go any further." Marcus processed this. He thought about the rent paid, about Curtis teaching him, about 81 men who decided his life mattered, about his mother sleeping well for the first time in years. "I want to move deeper," Marcus said. "I want to understand it all." Jake nodded slowly. "Then that's what we'll do. But understand, once you know the full picture, you can never unknow it. That knowledge comes with responsibility. If you're watching this and wondering whether Marcus made the right choice, that's the question that defines this entire story. Like this video if you're asking yourself that question. The education accelerated. Marcus began working in the warehouse rather than the workshop. He learned the supply chain, how product moved from manufacture to distribution, how cash flowed from retail to collection to banking, how the iron-bound maintained enough distance from actual criminal activity that prosecution became technically challenging while everyone understood exactly what was happening. It was sophisticated, more sophisticated than Marcus would have predicted. The iron-bound didn't simply deal in one commodity. They moved multiple streams: pharmaceutical distribution, high-end motorcycle parts, imported goods, and yes, other substances that existed in the nebulous space between legal and controlled. But what struck Marcus most was the structure of harm reduction. The iron-bound didn't deal to kids. They didn't operate in neighborhoods that couldn't afford the products. They maintained quality control so that whatever they moved couldn't cause harm beyond the intended effect. They had relationships with pharmacists and health professionals who could address overdoses if they occurred. "We're not saints," one of the senior members, a man called Docker, explained one afternoon while showing Marcus how to inventory incoming shipments. "But we're not evil either. We move product that people want. We do it efficiently. We protect our people from the legal system where we can. And we try not to create collateral damage beyond the inherent nature of the business." "That seems like a rationalization," Marcus said. "It is," Docker agreed. And it's also true. Both things can be true simultaneously. We're doing something the law forbids. That's illegal. But we're doing it in a way that minimizes harm and that values the people involved. That's not nothing. Curtis maintained his position in the apprenticeship even as Marcus learned the gray business. One evening, Curtis pulled Marcus aside. "You know what you're doing?" Curtis asked. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'm learning about the money side." "You know what that means?" "That I'm moving deeper into the organization. It means you're choosing a life that the straight world will never accept," Curtis said. "You're 16 years old, and you're choosing to be part of something that exists outside the law. That's not nothing. That's a decision that reshapes your entire future." "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked. Curtis took a long time answering. "No," he said finally. "I regret specific things I've done. I regret pain I've caused. But do I regret being part of the Ironbound? No, because the alternative, being isolated, being powerless, being alone, that would have been worse." "My mom doesn't know," Marcus said. "I know," Curtis said. "Jake wanted you to decide on your own before she needed to know. But she will know eventually, and when she does, she'll have to decide how she feels about it." That reckoning came 6 months later, when Catherine found documentation of Marcus's role in a shipment tracking system that he'd left open on his computer. She read it through completely, didn't stop him, didn't yell. Instead, she sat with him at the kitchen table and cried. "I wanted so much more for you," she said. "I wanted you to go to college, to have a normal life, to not have to make the choices that destroy you." "Mom," Marcus said gently, "I wanted you to breathe. I wanted you to not count change at the kitchen table and wonder if we'd have a place to sleep. I made a choice that gave you that." "And what about your choice?" Catherine asked. "What about what you're giving up?" "I'm not giving up," Marcus said. "I'm choosing something. I'm part of something larger than myself. I'm learning a skill set. I'm building a life that has meaning and community. Those aren't nothing." Catherine looked at her son. The boy who'd had hunger in his eyes just months ago now had purpose. She saw something harden and strengthen in him. She saw someone becoming an adult with deliberate speed. "Tell me you'll be careful," she said. "I'll be careful," Marcus said. "Tell me you'll never do anything that gets you caught." "I'll never do anything that gets me caught," Marcus said. Catherine knew these were promises he might not be able to keep, but she also knew that her son had made a choice more deliberate and informed than most teenagers ever did. He'd looked at his circumstances, recognized his options, and chosen a path with his eyes open. "All right," Catherine said finally, "then I'll try to support it." 18 months after Marcus had walked to the Ironbound clubhouse asking for work, Jake called him into his office again. "You've been a prospect for a year," Jake said. "You've learned the mechanics, you've learned the business. You've proved yourself reliable in both contexts. It's time for your elevation." "To full member?" Marcus asked. "To full member," Jake confirmed. "But first, there's a test. Every prospect goes through it. It's not physical. It's not about proving you're tough enough. It's about proving you understand what membership means." Jake laid out the scenario. A shipment had come through contaminated, not from anything the Ironbound had done, but from a supply issue on the manufacturing end. 3 people in a neighboring city had developed complications from using a portion of the shipment before the contamination was caught. 1 was hospitalized. None were dead, but 2 were in serious condition. "The question is, what do we do?" Jake asked. Marcus thought through it. The logical answer, the business answer, would be to absorb the loss, move forward, maintain distance, acknowledge nothing. "We own it," Marcus said. "We contact the hospital. We explain what happened and why it happened. We pay all medical bills, we ensure those people get the best care available, and we issue a complete recall of the affected shipment. That's going to cost us, Jake said. Significantly. We're talking about $150,000 in losses between recalled product, medical bills, and legal exposure. Then that's what it costs to be part of the Ironbound, Marcus said. Jake smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. That's right, Jake said. That's exactly right. You understand that loyalty to people supersedes financial calculation. You understand that integrity isn't free. You're ready. The elevation ceremony happened at a formal church meeting. All 81 members were present. Marcus was brought to stand before Jake, and the club's charter, a physical document containing the Ironbound's code and history, was placed on the table. Marcus Webb, Jake said formally, you've been a prospect with this club for 1 year. You've demonstrated the qualities we value: reliability, integrity, skill, and commitment to the people around you. You've proven that you understand our code and that you're willing to live it. Do you wish to become a full member of the Ironbound Motorcycle Club? I do, Marcus said. Then accept this responsibility, knowing that from this moment forward, you're bound to us and we're bound to you. We will support you in your struggles. We will stand with you against those who would harm you. We will demand that you live to our code, and we will never abandon you. Do you accept? I accept, Marcus said. Jake produced a cut, a full member's cut, with Marcus's road name embroidered across the back, Spark. It was Curtis's suggestion, a name honoring both the mechanical work Marcus had done and the potential the organization saw in him. The room erupted in applause as Jake helped Marcus put on the cut for the first time. It was heavy, weighted with symbolism and expectation and responsibility. It was also home. When the applause settled, Curtis stepped forward and clasped Marcus's shoulder. Welcome, Curtis said. Full member. That evening, the celebration extended to the warehouse where Marcus's mother had been waiting. She had a cake she'd made herself, Ironbound Strength, written in chocolate across the top. The members came through and ate cake and told Marcus what his membership meant. Not in sentimental ways, but in practical recognition. The organization had chosen him, and that choice came with weight and purpose. His mother pulled him aside late in the evening. "You're really part of them now," Catherine said. It wasn't a question. "I'm part of them now," Marcus confirmed. "I love you," Catherine said, "and I'm terrified for you. But I also see what this has given you. I see a young man who has purpose and community. That matters. Just promise me." "I promise I'll be careful," Marcus said. "That's not what I was going to ask for," Catherine said. "Promise me that you'll never forget why you started this. Promise me you'll remember that you walked to that clubhouse because you wanted to take care of me. Promise me that you'll never let that hunger for more, for power, for money consume who you are." Marcus held his mother, and he made that promise knowing it was harder to keep than any other he'd made. "I promise," he said. 5 years later, the Ironbound clubhouse underwent renovation. The garage that Curtis had operated out of for decades was being upgraded. New equipment, expanded space, full temperature control for precision work. Marcus, now 21 and a full member of 5 years, oversaw much of the project. His role in the organization had evolved. He still did mechanical work. The shovelhead had become legendary, displayed as the example of what precision and commitment could achieve. But he'd also become Jake's lieutenant, handling logistics, training new prospects, and serving as the bridge between the old guard and the younger riders coming in. Curtis, now 72, sat in a chair in the new garage and watched the work happen. "You remember when you first showed up?" Curtis asked Marcus. "I remember," Marcus said. "I was terrified." "You were hungry," Curtis corrected. "There's a difference. You had something you needed to protect. That made you brave." Curtis stood and walked to a wall where the shovel head had been mounted as a permanent fixture, a monument to what could be built through commitment and craft. "This bike has taught more people about excellence than any school could," Curtis said. "And you were part of that. You were part of building something that mattered." Marcus's mother had gotten married again to one of the Ironbound's accountants, a divorced man named Richard, who treated her with the kind of respect she'd been denied her entire life. She and Richard had opened a restaurant using the money they'd saved, a small place that served real food to real people. The Ironbound became one of their most consistent customer bases. Catherine had made peace with her son's choices. She didn't love what he did exactly, but she'd come to understand that he'd chosen consciously and with full knowledge of the consequences. That consciousness, that deliberation, had transformed the choice from something she could condemn into something she could respect. Marcus had taken Curtis's original question seriously. What happens when you have to teach someone else? A new prospect came through, a kid, 17, hungrier than even Marcus had been. Jake had nodded at Marcus. "You're his mentor now," Jake said. "You teach him what Curtis taught you. You show him that excellence matters, that commitment is worth more than shortcuts, that belonging to something means something only if you're willing to earn it." Marcus had taken the young man, whose road name became Prophet, to the workshop. "You see this bike?" Marcus asked, pointing to the shovel head. "This took 2 years to restore. Every part was chosen, every seal was inspected, every bolt was set with precision. That's what we do here. We don't do anything halfway." Prophet had looked at the shovel head with something approaching reverence. "Will I be able to help restore something like that?" Prophet asked. "Yeah," Marcus said, "but you're going to start by learning how to clean properly. And then you're going to spend months on simple tasks until you understand why those simple tasks matter. That's how it works." Doubters. What Marcus understood now, what Curtis had been trying to teach him all along, was that the Ironbound's real business wasn't motorcycles or the grey commerce that kept the organization financially stable. The real business was transformation. Taking people who had nothing, no community, no purpose, no sense of belonging, and giving them all three. The organization had changed Marcus from a desperate boy willing to risk everything for his mother into a young man with purpose and community and future. The motorcycle work was meditation on that transformation. The grey business was the cost of maintaining the space where that transformation could happen. Standing in the new garage, watching Prophet learn to clean motorcycle parts properly, seeing Curtis approve the young man's work, Marcus understood something fundamental, the promise he'd made to his mother 5 years ago to remember why he'd started wasn't about rejecting the Ironbound's darker activities. It was about maintaining the human core of what they did. Every piece of commerce they engaged in was ultimately in service of supporting the people in their community. Every decision was ultimately calculated to protect and preserve the brotherhood. The money mattered only because it funded the stability that allowed 81 men and their families to thrive. Jake appeared in the garage, watching the same scene Marcus was watching. Prophet learning from Marcus the way Marcus had learned from Curtis. The generational transmission of excellence. "You did good," Jake said. "You're bringing that kid in, training him. That's what matters." "We're not criminals," Marcus said. It came out as a question. "We're whatever we need to be to survive," Jake said. "Sometimes that's criminals, sometimes that's craftspeople, sometimes that's community. Usually it's all three simultaneously." He paused. "Your mother's doing well?" "Really well," Marcus said. "The restaurant's profitable. She's happy." "That was the point," Jake said. "That's always been the point. You remember when you walked up to our fence asking for work?" "Every day," Marcus said. "You remember what you had then? Nothing. Hunger. Desperation. Now what do you have?" Marcus thought about it. "Family. Purpose. A future I can see. That's what the Ironbound does. Jake said. "We transform hunger into purpose. That's our real business. Everything else, the money, the product, the grey operations, that's all infrastructure for the transformation." As the afternoon light moved across the garage floor, Marcus watched Prophet learn, Curtis observe with approval, and the shovelhead shine on its display mount like a monument to what commitment and time could create. He thought about the boy who'd walked 3 miles desperately asking for work. That boy had become a man. He had become someone who now stood in the position Jake had occupied, preparing the next generation for a life that existed outside conventional understanding, but within a code of honor that was probably more rigid than most military structures. There were costs to this life. There were risks. There were choices that would haunt him if he let them, but there was also belonging. There was community. There was the knowledge that when you walked into a room with your cut on, 81 people would stand beside you without question. That was the promise the Ironbound had made to Marcus. And in teaching Prophet, in maintaining the mechanical excellence Curtis had taught him, in honoring the code, Marcus was keeping his end of the promise to them. His mother had asked him to remember why he started. He did remember, but he'd also learned that the reason he'd started, protecting his mother, was just the beginning. The real story was what came after. The real story was transformation through community. The real story was choosing not just to survive, but to thrive alongside others who'd made the same choice. The Ironbound wasn't a perfect organization. It did things the law forbade. It moved in margins that legitimate society preferred not to acknowledge. But within its boundaries, it had created something real, a structure where desperate people could find purpose, where hungry people could find community, where boys could become men with dignity and choice. As evening fell on the garage, and Marcus moved Prophet through the next phase of his apprenticeship, the shovelhead caught the last light of the day and gleamed like a promise kept. If this story moved you, if it made you think about community, about family, about the price of belonging, thank you for watching. Subscribe for more stories about the people who exist outside the edges but inside the code. And remember, the strongest bonds are forged not through blood, but through choice. We'll see you next time.